This is the third remake of this video, and this video represents my earliest successful concept for this channel. Despite the dubious quality of my initial attempts, the video was always performing fairly well, but this time we're going to do it right. This is the definitive Preacher Gamer Tri-Ace Retrospective. The developer was founded in 1995 by former Telnet Japan employees fresh from their development of Tales of Phantasia. 3 of these developers left the subsidiary Wolf Team to form their own company, Tri-Ace Games. The name being a description of the 3 men as being the winning cards in a deck. Yoshihiro Gatandanda was the principal writer for Tales of Phantasia, inventing the concept and serving as lead programmer. Joe Asanuma was director for Tales of Phantasia and was ousted from the position while the game was in production due to clashes with Namco over how the Tales game should be made. And Masaki Moramoto, the third ace, was a designer of scenarios and a writer on Tales. And all 3 of these men continued their respective roles in this new company. The game takes a top-down perspective for both its exploration and battle scenes. Battles are in real time, with the player having direct control of only one character at a time. The other characters are run off of special pre-selected program scripts to take certain actions based on what type of character they are. Melee characters perform melee attacks and special attacks called death blows. Magic casters cast offensive and defensive magic depending on their specialty. The player character can be swapped mid-battle to take more direct control of any one party member. Other actions can be taken, such as using items that are metered by the implementation of cooldown bars to keep the player from spamming certain actions. Item creation is a big part of the Star Ocean series, and after the battle, in addition to experience, players learn SP, which they can spend to upgrade certain abilities to improve the item creation success and the accessibility to better and better equipment. Also included is the affection system. By participating in private actions, players can add or subtract affection points, which changes how the characters feel about one another. A player can enter a town normally or activate these private actions to seek out other party members in town and interact with them. These affinity points affect stat buffs situationally in battle, but are most known for their ability to change the endings of the game. Released late into the lifespan of the Super Famicom, the game pushes the hardware to its absolute limits. Released on a large 48 megabit cartridge and making use of the S0DD1 chip in the cartridge in aid of decompressing data. This essentially meant the game was bigger than 48 megs and had to be compressed to fit and then decompressed on the fly to run. The only other game to use this chip was Street Fighter Alpha. The game also contained a flexible voice driver, which allowed for the compression of sound to store numerous voice clips. Depending on the situation, characters may have different voice lines that play before and after battles, based on context of the moment. Released July 19th of 1996 in Japan, the game was never released in North America. Enix of America had closed its doors a year prior due to poor American sales, and Nintendo passed on publishing rights in favor of focusing on the coming soon Nintendo 64. I recommend the 2018 remake if you like old school RPGs specifically. The game sold well enough to warrant a sequel, but information on the development of that sequel is scant. The game was released on the PlayStation in Japan in 1998 and in North America the following year, with Europe having to wait till the year 2000. Set 20 years after the previous entry, the game follows the perspective of 2 characters. Before the game begins, you are asked to choose which one of these 2 characters you would like to play. The choice does not affect the overall narrative, but it will determine the perspective you see the story from, which optional characters can be recruited, and by extension, the multitude of endings that you can experience. This game carries over and refines the mechanics of its predecessors with updated visuals, sound, and the addition of pre-rendered backgrounds and cutscenes. I have an entire retrospective dedicated to this game alone, so I will not dwell too much on it here, but you can follow the link in the description or the card in the corner if you want to watch that video, if you would like to know even more. I go over the game's entire history and multiple releases in depth, talking about its themes and the remakes and so much more. Star Ocean: The Second Story was a big success, selling over 1 million copies worldwide. It was adapted into a 7-volume manga and a 26-episode anime show on TV Tokyo in 2001. Both the manga and the anime leave off at the end of the first disc's plot, and the rest of the story was released on 5 CDs using the same voice actors as the anime in Japan. The game has been officially remastered and remade since, and the most recent remake, released in 2023, came out to positive critical reception. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and comes highly recommended. The new remake is particularly excellent, and more playable than ever. With the success that they found in Star Ocean 2, Tri-Ace dove into their next release, a new IP themed around Norse mythology. Valkyrie Profile was released in late 1999 in Japan, and in August 2000 in North America, to similar acclaim and success to Star Ocean 2. You play as Lenneth, a recently awakened Valkyrie, in the service of Odin and Freya, to travel Midgard collecting the souls of slain heroes who become her companions in battle in the coming conflict, Ragnarok. Once human, as Lenneth walks among the living, she slowly uncovers the truth of who she was before she became a Valkyrie. The gameplay is split up between side-view 2D platforming and exploration segments. There is also 3D world map movement and a unique turn-based battle system. Each currently active party member is assigned a button on the PlayStation controller. All members execute commands simultaneously, and you need to use the party members strategically to overcome the enemies based on their stats and specialties. If Lenneth falls in battle, you have limited turns to revive her before it's game over, as all the other members of the party are tied to her. There are 6 character types associated with different weapons. There are 24 recruitable characters in the game, though some are locked behind difficulty level selection. With 2 possible endings, the game has a lot of replay value, like many other Tri-Ace games, and has been ported and remastered more than once. Back to Star Ocean, the next release for the studio was the Japanese exclusive Game Boy Color sequel to the second story, Blue Sphere, released in 2001. Developed in only a single year, the game follows the characters from Second Story to the planet Edifice, 2 years after the events of Second Story. The heroes are brought down on the planet by a mysterious force and need to work together to escape. Bringing over the staple mechanics of the series but in portable form, the game adds multiplayer options through the Game Boy's Game Link cable. The game was not released in North America due to the size of the cartridge for the Game Boy Color and the amount of translated text. Also, Enix was focused on the Game Boy Advanced hardware rather than the Game Boy Color in the region. A mobile remake was made and released in Japan for phones in 2008. Also, there is an online petition that has been circulated to add Blue Sphere to the recent 2023 remake as either DLC or a standalone sequel. Next came the brave new world of the PlayStation 2, with the ominously named Star Ocean Till the End of Time. Released in Japan and initially published by Enix in 2003, it was actually the last game published by the company before the merger, and released with substantial technical issues in Japan. Enix blamed these issues on Sony and the hardware, but Sony denied responsibility. The game was re-released a year later under the Director's Cut title with bug fixes and additional content published by the now merged Square Enix in Japan and also in North America. The game was released in Europe but was published there by Ubisoft. Carrying over all the features from the first 2 mainline games but tweaked for the difference in hardware, the game is now fully 3D thanks to the power of the PlayStation 2. The playable party is reduced from 4 to 3, and more attack options are added via the length buttons are held for attacks. Light attacks are tapped inputs, and heavy attacks are long inputs. The player can be KO'd by losing all their hit points, which is pretty usual, but also their MP needs to be maintained above 0, which means that you need to be aware of both resources at all times. Characters also have stamina stats, although the game calls it a fury meter. Fury is replenished by standing still for a bit. If you're moving in battle, fury depletes. If you run out of fury, your character will move slowly. In previous entries, melee characters had the advantage of being able to attack without consequence, while magic characters had cooldown bars on their spells. The fury mechanic nerfs melee characters to make magic characters more viable. It forces melee characters to rest on occasion and leads to a strategy of rushing in, attacking, and then rushing out of the battle to rebuild fury before rushing in again. A lot, but not all enemies are slow moving to give the player time to implement these strategies. There is also the bonus battle gauge, which is introduced for the first time but remains a staple in the series from here on after, even in remakes. When a player strikes an enemy, they receive bonus points that can chain for special effects. However, it can be broken if the player receives critical damage, dies in battle, or runs away. It is also reset when the game is turned off or reloaded from a save. Item creation returns, but now can only be performed in specialized locations in towns. Battle trophies are also added as in-game achievable system for the completionist-minded player. Players are rewarded tangibly for these trophies with increasing sound test options, alternative costumes, and more. Set 400 years after the second story, you play as Fate Lion God, who very quickly has his family vacation turned upside down with the invasion of the Vendini. Turns out he was their target all along, and after he is rescued from a series of his own adventures, he sets out to find his childhood friend Sophia, his parents, who were all taken by the Vendini, with the help of some new friends that he made along the way. The adventure opens up as Fate learns more about his powers and the mysterious nature of the universe. The third new IP, produced by the studio, Radiata Stories, was released for the PlayStation 2 in 2005 in North America and Japan. Featuring a much simplified version of the Star Ocean combat system with a slower pace and the return of a fourth party member, the real appeal of this game is the way it interacts with its world and NPCs. Similar to Majora's Mask, the world persists and the characters are more fleshed out than most game NPCs. They have daily routines, jobs, personalities, and houses, and even change their behavior depending on the time of day or night and the differing days of the week. You can kick any of the NPCs 3 times to enter a battle with them, or guards once per day to win experience or money. You can kick almost anything in the world, in fact, causing varying effects. 176 of the NPCs are recruitable party members that can be added to your roster in varying ways. A major event in the middle of the game changes who can be recruited and which side of the war your character will fight for. This leads to 2 endings and essentially 2 wholly different experiences. When I played this game back in the day, I made a save right before the midpoint choice, so when I finished one route, I just loaded that save and then finished the other one. To make a whole replay easier, there is a New Game Plus option. This game is full of personality and intrigue. It does not have the most deep mechanics, but the world more than makes up for it. The painterly art style is impressive graphically as well, and gives the visuals a dusty tome look, which I quite like. I preferred this game to Star Ocean 3 in fact, but it's a little harder to replay once you have seen everything, just because of the slower combat system. Released everywhere in 2006 and 2007, the follow-up is actually a prequel to the original game, taking place hundreds of years before. The story revolves around 2 characters who share one body. Silmeria was a Valkyrie, but was punished for her betrayal by Odin and reincarnated in the body of Elysia. Silmeria awakens, and the 2 of them have to work together to stop a war between Midgard and Asgard. Divided into chapters and containing similar play mechanics to the original, the game garnered critical success for its graphics and presentation, although some critics did not care for its convoluted interface and difficulty level.
It's dinner time now, so you can come too.
Her place? No one told me about that.
Let's go now. I'm really hungry. Dinner, 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 dinner.
You're not triplets!
I was not aware of the reputation of this game as a meme. I was just browsing the game store one day and saw a Tri-Ace label and bought it. But even after seeing its meme status online, I was optimistic. The game story intrigued me. You play as Capel, who is the twin of a famous freedom fighter. The moon is chained to the world, and the world is on the verge of destruction, and it'll be up to Capel to save it. Released for the Xbox 360 in 2008, I tried to play this game a few times and could not get very far. At its roots, it shares a lot in common with other Tri-Ace games, just trying to transition to a more immersive setup. But it feels clunky compared to those other games, and stiff to me. Your mileage may vary though. Released in 2008 in Japan and early 2009 everywhere else, this DS title is once again a prequel or an in-between-quel. The game opts for a tactical turn-based system, and the story centers around a human protagonist seeking revenge against Lenneth for taking away his father. How would humans view the intervention of Valkyries in the affairs of Midgard? That is the premise of this game. The titular Plume describes a mechanic in which an item can be used in combat to boost the stats of a unit, but that unit will be permanently sacrificed. Items can be gained from the sacrifice. The game's ending and narratives are affected by the choices you make. Another game that receives mixed reviews, it remains on my backlog list as well. I have in the past struggled to connect with tactics games in general, though I do have certain ones that I enjoy. If you like tactics games, it might be worth giving the game a try. Now let's take a closer look at the 3 released Star Ocean games before we look at the games co-developed by the studio for other publishers. The game seems to be trying to correct past criticisms, focusing more heavily on its science fiction elements. A 4-player battle party returns as well, along with new features including the rush gauge and blindsides. Both allow the player to situationally turn the tide of battle. The game ended a bit of a slump for the studio and reviewed fairly well. I need to try some more of this game. The game has been remastered and came out for the modern consoles in 2017. Released in 2016, I have been in the past very critical of the designs of some of the characters, in particular Fiore, whose outfit is just ridiculous. I really like RPGs, but my least favorite aspect, and surefire way to make me not want to play your game, is to include a character that leans into fan service a little too hard. But for the sake of being thorough, let's talk about the game. The game features 7 party members, and all of them are available to switch to in battle at any time. The game switches seamlessly to these battle scenes and back. Critics were hard on the game's more budget title elements and the lack of cutscenes. Most scenes are voiced, but done in-engine with less than desirable camera angles. I remember watching the trailers for this game and thinking, alright, maybe they're listening, maybe they are doing a big budget, grown-up, interesting Star Ocean game again. Look at the traversal in this game, it looks really fun, but then... seriously, why? The game had middling reviews, kinda like its last entry, and most of the criticism followed along similar lines. Around this time, the company began to branch off into existing IPs of other companies, which I'll make a short list here. Games like Final Fantasy XIII-2 and Resonance of Fate for Sega. The next few years saw some partnership with Konami as well, on portable systems like the PSP and also the DS, resulting in Frontier Gate Boost Plus, as well as a game titled Beyond the Labyrinth, and the only arcade game that I can see on their list, which is a sequel to Silent Scope. Next came a few releases for the PlayStation Vita called Judas Code and Phantasy Star Nova, again for Sega. The next original IP in 2015 was Exist Archive, The Other Side of the Sky. I spent about a half hour with this game recently, and it seems to have a mission-based structure, as well as a return to some anime aesthetics that I like about the previous games. But unfortunately to me, it feels kind of built down to a budget. It's a far cry from the polish that the company has had in the past. Looking into the history of this game, it seems that Tri-Ace assisted in its development more than developed it outright. The game received some positive reception though, and to me anyway, has an interesting story premise from the beginning. It is worth noting that around this time, Tri-Ace was acquired by a Japanese mobile company named Nepro Japan. So of course 2 mobile games were published in the wake of the buyout, called Heaven X Inferno in Star Ocean and Amnesis. Despite being acquired by a mobile company, Tri-Ace continued to publish console games and rounded out the decade with a 4K port of The Last Hope and Resonance of Fate. Finally, Star Ocean the Second Story was remade from the ground up with an HD 2D aesthetic in 2023 by Gem Drops. I have a full retrospective of Second Story on this channel, and if you liked this video, you can follow the link in the description to see that video right here. Thank you so much for watching this retrospective, and as always, have a great day.